Like with a few other game series being left on the shelf to collect dust before recently receiving proper revivals, Super Mario Wonder was finally announced and then shortly released thereafter as a brand new Mario game, while the Mario Maker titles were busy carrying the mantle since the one on the Wii U. This wasn't going to be just a new 2D Mario game either, but one that would break free from the established formulaic roots of the new series. God, that naming scheme is still so awful. Finally, a refreshing take on the formula, promising to be wacky, weird, otherworldly, and bank in on the out there presentation and mushroom-eating implications Mario has had for the longest time. I originally thought to have a short preamble like Joseph Anderson did for his Odyssey video about being a Mario fan, but I'll skip it given I'm sure it won't work if I put in such a thing. I'll just say how I've played a ton of Mario games, both 2D and 3D over the years, making me far from a stranger to the series, and hope you take me at my word. I genuinely, really don't see why so many people love this game as much as they do, and how people are, popping champagne over this game, so to speak. I think it's a good, quality game, but Mario Wonder does very little to progress the series forward into anything besides its really strong, solid presentation, much less the platforming genre as a whole. It's a well-made game, and little else. I felt it was generally way too easy, in spite me being a platforming veteran. The badge system they have here is both underwhelming and lacking, and even with the promised creativity a lot of the advertising showed off, I can't bring myself to say it's one of the avidly strong points of this game. Playing this felt like I was rolling a 20-sided dice, and needed a 16 or higher in order to get a wonder effect that really made me go, okay, now this is pretty cool. It felt like a decent length given the price, around 8 hours or so to beat Bowser casually, but it really heavily varies on how many stages you do. The amount of stages you need to complete so you can progress is really lenient, but besides being really good to look at, I really don't know what this game does great or amazing. Now time for the $1 million question, or, well, $60 question in this case. Do I personally think it's worth the asking price? Honestly, no. I'm a bit stingy when it comes to the price of games, given my source of income is subpar to say the least. But comparing this game to the competition it has, I don't see why it should be above $50 for what we got here. I'm definitely the exception compared to many others. I can list at least 5 other somewhat recent platformers that I think are actually better than this game in not only what they seek to do, but also better justify their price points as well. They're on screen for any of you audio-only listeners. Without further ado though, let's get into one of the biggest reasons you'd buy this game, that being just how pretty it is to look at. This is definitely one of the best looking games on the Switch, even if I don't know of any ways it's pushing the hardware. As a primer for this girthy video, I wanted to first praise the visuals that were the apple to everyone's eye during the first glimpses to this game. We finally departed from the kind of lazy, plain, standard look the new Super Mario Bros. Games had established, and then followed religiously. They weren't games I feel I could compliment almost anything in terms of looks. They never remotely pushed their respective hardware, or had any interesting camera angles. I guess the DS title tried something with the downscaled 3D models. Even then it was probably just a cost-saving measure. There really were no parts of visual flair, outside of very, very few minute examples, until 3D World actually landed with the squeaky clean look as an art direction. I actually enjoyed looking at the game in that case, but I would be lying if I said I wasn't beyond tired of the extremely safe and average look Mario kept for so long. It makes me so glad they finally tried their own thing this time around. The biggest development is with all the different animations they went out of their way to do. Enemies finally feel more in line with the ones in the Donkey Kong games by Retro Studios, being much more aware of their surroundings and avidly reactive to things that happen. A very few selection of enemies in the past titles actually bothered to look at you, but for the most part they tended to be static, mindless drones in a video game, serving their purpose as game obstacles, and nothing else. Now a vast majority of enemies pay attention to your location, And this is a mere supplement to the absurd amount of different animations we have here for extra flair, practically everywhere. Just look at these enemies panic because they can't move out of the way of the bubbles coming to delete them. Goombas get upset when they get stuck. Or with a lot of enemies reacting to their fellow friends being stomped on, or blasted right in front of their eyes. Or all the different ways enemies have of dealing damage to you by touching them. At long last we see Goombas bite you, or other enemies swipe their hands as a way to convey they hurt you, given the fact that touching them deals damage, showing a reason for you getting hurt other than because it's a video game. Hell, you can bump into sleeping Goombas and you won't take any damage. Easily one of the most basic enemies in a video game has gotten an absurd amount of detail and love put into its animations. You shoot fireballs from both hands now. Something small now looks like it makes a lot more sense, instead of the awkward animation they looped before. And even when you're crouching it looks really cute. These crouched animations and poses are really good at making me chuckle. Entering pipes also has its own unique animation in many cases too, with the different characters trying to actually get in, as opposed to the game doing this really static, dull vacuum effect like in the past games. It also applies to exiting pipes from many different directions as well. Don't forget about how you open doors, and coming out of them having its own changed look. And every previously mentioned action for pipes and doors also has extra work put into it for anyone in elephant form. Their much bigger, chunkier body gives each character trouble when fitting into these spaces, but the animation is still at the same speed, so it doesn't affect gameplay negatively either. Even other touches like characters looking more serious and ready to act when you hold down the run button, and all the occasional tiny references to old Mario art were made. There's absolutely a lot to gush over, and the animation for this game is something quite top-notch. It's just as good as everyone says it is. Very few other platformers out there have this level of mastery over easily conveying all these different things. And I didn't even get into the specifics of how it's all done. It could easily be its own video over half an hour long. P. Jiggles and Video Game Animation Study both have videos over 15 minutes long where much of it is just talking about the different animations they made. 95% of other platformers don't even come close to the amount of situational movements enemies and characters do in this game. It's great. Even these tiny flower propellers you ride on, you can momentarily move, even if it doesn't matter gameplay-wise. The visual of the Poplin houses swirling around and transforming back is also something I never, ever get tired of looking at as well. I definitely don't feel as positive with the locations themselves. Some still felt kind of flat to look at, but they were pleasing to the eyes and managed to be varied in the types you saw, with some having cool details in the background. And they also changed plenty, so I can't complain about them much at all. The usage of color choices worked well together, and visual clarity succeeded similarly, because I never had to think of what I was actually looking at, or how I was almost never worried about things looking blurry or blending in with one another badly. A standout example, I think, would be the background for one of these levels in World 2. The color transitions in the clouds from one into the other very seamlessly. I'm frankly not sure how they got it to look this good at times. They wanted to go for this in a dream feeling, and that works for an apt description of many of these locations. Dreamy truly feels like the word to describe it all. It's otherworldly with the selection of locales, and it looks like a nice opposite end of the spectrum that Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze goes for, with the strides that game does to look much more on the realistic side of things. Visuals are only half of a game's presentation, however, and the people in charge of the sound department were no slouches either, thankfully, and it really shows. The music has also seen a bump up in production value, because the new series of games got extremely lazy with their music. They straight up copied and pasted a huge amount of tracks as the games went on, with minimal to no changes. There's definitely a good amount you can do with music in a game, alongside cool sound design if developers ever come up with clever implementations, and if they ever care to go that far, besides anything that's been established as standard anyways. Besides the typical cheery, happy-go-lucky music Mario is famous for, we see nice supplements to what we're used to. Just like previous games when you rode Yoshi, they went out of their way to make elephant versions of most of the music. And while it's long past being innovative, it's still nice they put it in. The other two power-ups don't change the music to the same extent at all, which is a shame. We could have had them up at the presentation when using them, but we only have the drill make the music sound muffled when underground. The music, unlike most Mario games, I actually found myself vibing with more often than usual. Besides the Galaxy titles and 64, almost every Mario soundtrack I felt had a handful or just a specific track that stood out, with the rest mostly just getting the job done in the moment. Mario Wonder stood out to me with its music for sure. It's no top tier Sonic or Mega Man soundtrack, but it's got a sizable list of good stuff in here. Take the music that plays when you ride the horde of bulls in World 1. It well captures the feeling of being frantic and adrenaline pumping, alongside a surprising choice of a somewhat western feel of all things. It fits this wonder effect like a glove. Hell, here's some footage of a bull run in Spain. It fits right in. Or how about the Fungi Mines theme for the overworld? A lot of clanging and eerie sounds to make this place feel really uninviting, as it should be. There's a lot of unexplored ground here, with some weird ruins to deep dive into. It's hard for me to pick out examples, because there's just so many to choose from that adhere to established norms in desert, ice, or lava world themes in video games, while feeling like their own thing here. Typically, I don't feel Mario music banks in as much as it could for its levels and environments either, but this is truly a soundtrack that unquestionably works in the moment. The game also does more with the whole music as the past 2D titles started as a thing, while experimenting more with the gameplay working in tandem to what you listen to with this game's different music stages. There's a few of these music-centered levels that put on a spectacle of a show for you, with enemies singing or dancing to the beat, and how other things also move around while corresponding to the music, or the game asking you to pay attention to the beat for a jump boost. I also wonder how many people notice the change of volume when you're jumping near the bottom of a pit, and how the sound gets quieter the closer you are to the bottom. I absolutely never get bored when listening or looking at different aspects of this game. Also, a bit of a point of contention before, and still after this game came out, was these weird talking flowers we saw all throughout gameplay, and people wondering what their whole deal was. I'm actually kind of fond of these things. The reception of these weird, blossoming buffoons is mixed, and for good reason. I don't think anyone was asking for such a thing to be in a Mario game. But hey, they're definitely unique and distinctive. About half the time you run across these things, they'll be saying some interesting dialogue, or just acting as friendly passerby. About the other half of the time though, they'll give you some nice words of encouragement, standing out in my mind during some of the trickier segments of the game, like the harder badge challenges. I found myself smirking for a bit when they told me stuff like, "You can do it! Keep trying!" even when it was something that wasn't hard to do at all. I've seen people not even remotely thinking of their inclusion in a good light, and it makes me wonder how many of the people playing are just immune to positive reinforcement, I guess. I would tweak them a bit so they don't say their lines more than twice or 3 times in a level, and I also feel they could have given more gameplay advice than they do now. But ultimately, I like these things for what they did. They definitely serve their purpose. They help a ton with making these levels not feel as empty, standard platforming challenges our near-silent protagonists go through. Of all games to do this before Wonder, it was Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric that did a very similar concept, even if the amount of dialogue was way too common there. They gave characters things to say while you played levels, commenting on different scenarios, level architecture, and what they needed to do next. Ideally, it would be more like that while cutting out the fluff, but still, the talking flowers in Wonder work well. I just don't understand why we can't completely shut these things up. You can turn off the text bubbles, or their voices, but not both at the same time. Why does Nintendo want to force these things onto us that much anyway? Oh well. The number of toggleable languages is also admirable. 15 different language options exist for these things. Oh yeah, They made sure to throw us older players a bone by making some of these cease to exist in front of us, or get burnt by lava, so that's also nice. Now if only they kept in the several months of work they put into that live commentary they originally planned. Maybe next time. As a quick rundown as to how this game feels to play, I found almost nothing wrong with the controls here either, given they've had it pretty spot on all the way back since Mario 3. I wanted to possibly give this game and the past 2D titles a deep look for reference, but that would be looking for very minor things to criticize, compared to how much a series like Sonic is busy fumbling basic game feel. That blue rat is always drooling in a corner somewhere with a loaded diaper just over its own controls. There's very little about them that annoyed me here, besides the forced motion controls. There. What? Holy crap! You can actually turn them off! Finally! So many past Mario games forced motion controls onto you for no good reason. It's about damn time whoever kept forcing them onto us got their head out of their ass and got told to piss off. I'm also really glad they brought back the ability to kick shells upwards Mario World introduced, because it's somehow been an eternity since we've seen this as a feature outside of Mario Maker. I've still got a few gripes though. Controls aren't really mappable to anything you'd want, only swappable, something Nintendo is infamous for not implementing. So much for their games being accessible to audiences, and yet you can't freely map your controls to whatever you might possibly desire. Besides that universal rule for Nintendo games, I also wish the swimming controls just gave you the dolphin kick ability by default. Seems we're gonna be forever stuck with the standard Mario World set, and just never innovate or improve on that remotely. It's not like you couldn't design the water levels behind the freedom and fluidity you get from the dolphin kick either. It also makes the badge system outright redundant for water stages, because why am I going to equip a high jump or spin jump boost for a stage where I'm mostly swimming anyways? Also, another thing I wish they thought to change is how you still shoot projectiles to the same button you use to run and hold items. There's definitely a lot of overlap here. If you want to pick shells up, make sure you don't fire a projectile to its direction first. There's plenty of ways to possibly go about it, but it got annoying a few times for obvious reasons. Just map shooting projectiles to another face button as an option or something. The camera also needed more refining. I never understood why they never brought back camera panning like in Mario World and even Mario DS, where in those games you could set it left or right at will. But that just isn't present here. Looking up and down is also missing. Usually levels are structured in a way so that the camera won't be your cause of death a vast majority of the time, but I don't get its lack of flexibility. As for the character roster here, it's also seen a big lift from previous titles. It's way more in line with the character selects in the Mario Party and sports spin-offs, which is nice to see, even if some are just plain recolors of each other. And yeah, the easy mode characters were badly implemented, and I agree with most people on it being a bad idea. They should have just been a toggle for the mode itself instead. I also wish they gave Nabbit his own unique abilities, because the Yoshis can flutter jump, carry people, and eat things, but Nabbit is just a basic character in terms of functions. He has nothing extra like being able to carry more power-ups for other people, or getting more coins from power-ups he can't use. At least there's no big downside of playing as the easy mode characters in terms of missing out on content, besides just the menu stated caveat of being unable to use power-ups. The multiplayer in 2D Mario has also seen many changes in different aspects, and it's been pretty overhauled. It doesn't resemble the past games too much. We unfortunately have a step back with the multiplayer camera. The developers just plainly forgot to tweak the camera to zoom out, so people don't get killed by the screen moving so easily. They show the game can clearly do it in a few instances like this level here. It's far from something implemented last minute as a measly attempt to push more sales. It works just fine in Mario Wonder, alongside the multiplayer in Mario Wonder not having to rely on the marketing for the game to hide just how broken and unfunctional it is.
Knuckles, no! Knuckles, don't look directly into the light, Knuckles!
Thankfully, this game's multiplayer was made much more enjoyable compared to past titles in aspects besides your field of view, with how you finally don't bump into other players when playing. Characters no longer have collisions with one another, besides when you're trying to ride Yoshi. And so the game is much more bearable to actually get through now when standing on thin platforms, or trying to get somewhere specific. Anything higher than 2 people playing at once in Wii or Wii U was chaos incarnate. The power-up balloons you inflate are not only easy to cancel if you change your mind when you activate one, but stay in place as opposed to hypothetically tossing a power-up onto the ground, and then it being moved by platforms or falling into pits. Another cool added change is how you no longer have to worry about people taking multiple power-ups for themselves. This is besides turning into a ghost when you die, and being able to float towards other players or their standees to come back. You no longer need to spend a life every single time you die just to come back. This is also besides no longer needing to shake your Wii remote excessively to make your bubble eventually make its way back to a player. You freely control the method to respawn yourself. And even on top of that, the timer gets shorter and shorter each time you respawn, so it's got a bit of balance put into it. I just wish it was an option to activate the chaotic multiplayer that older 2D titles had. Letting people throw each other into pits, or bash each other's skulls with barrels was definitely its own form of fun. Oh, and an upset I came across is how in local multiplayer, everyone is forced to use the same badge. People will probably have to come to some sort of compromise when playing together on what should be equipped. A quick note on the online, I don't have too many comments on it given I'm not about to pay for it just for this video. Sorry for being broke, but it's an interesting spin they put on it. Hopefully it's true about the performance being better than not, and the cute, fun moments people have of interacting with others is definitely unique too. I'm glad the developers tried something to work around the 1980s computer running Windows XP that hosts all of Nintendo's online services. I've seen a fair share of clips where people interact with others in nice ways, by hinting towards secrets, or waiting for others at the end of levels, just so that everyone makes it to the flagpole at the same time. Okay, so moving on, how about I compliment the amount of ideas we have here? They stated in an interview how they came up with over a whopping 2,000 ideas, and decided to refine and then implement the best ones. It does seem like this game has the best enemy variety in a 2D Mario, and probably more than any other single non-Maker title out there. Even counting titles like Mario World, given that game has a very healthy roster of about 48 or so original enemies in that game. For the sake of simplicity and general consistency, I'm counting an enemy as something that you can kill, and it can kill you in return. If either factor isn't true, then something isn't an enemy, and more so files under a stage gimmick for me, like the hoppos that are completely invincible and just bounce around. There's definitely exceptions to what does and doesn't count as an enemy under this rule, but I tried to be consistent, and I feel this is generally a solid rule of thumb to follow for many games out there. Shout out to A's for the solid definition, by the way. The level gimmick amount is also some of, if not the best for a Mario game, without the Wonder Flowers being a factor as well. The level ideas are usually only pushed further, or supplemented by the flower effects, and if this game didn't have the Wonder Flower, I wouldn't be hugely let down in what you do in the levels by themselves. Every level that isn't a side one like the badge challenges and break times gets an effect too, and given the main level count is about 80, it's fairly commendable work to make sure every single main level has a Wonder Flower effect. They went the extra mile in terms of quantity here, putting aside the actual applications of their ideas. Another plus for this game is how they didn't try to make the level design fit multiple people at once. Mario Bros. Wii tended to have these huge platforms or giant wheels to stand on by comparison. It feels pretty tight and focused here for the most part. By now, I've praised the presentation and a lot of other aspects of this game, likewise with how good the enemy and level variety is. So, what the hell is up with my video title? Why was I kind of disappointed with this game as I went on? The stages play perfectly fine. They have little issues for most of the runtime. Things like fake difficulty or unfair design are very sparse. It's also got a well-fed stream of ideas to keep you guessing on what the game is going to throw at you next. Well, the thing is, I take issue with a lot of things in this game that aren't the main levels you go through, but even those come with some missed potential with their concepts. A good amount of factors that aren't the presentation and main level design I feel don't come remotely close to being as good as they could have been. I have 4 main issues with this game. Levels don't capitalize on their theming nearly enough. The badge system here is underwhelming and only decent. It's way too easy for too much of its runtime, and the overworld is really boring. There's other issues I have with the game, but these are definitely my biggest complaints. You have your timestamps. Hopefully YouTube doesn't take 2 weeks to implement them this time around. They're in the description just in case. Well, let's get to it then. As for what I see as one of the big misses of this game, it's that the presentation and the gameplay don't work together with one another a decent amount of the time. What do I mean? Well, it's how what you do in levels, and what the worlds are presented as, had a habit of not blending nicely. Partly due to the high standards this game should be living up to, I feel, and frankly, with how easy it should have been, it's a reason this game doesn't hit the mark for me. And well, they evidently worked really hard in making this game look this good, but what you do in levels sometimes is just what you'd find in a typical platformer anyways. Simply put, there's a ton of missed potential here with possible level concepts and ideas. Let's try going through the worlds for examples. Starting with World 1, it seems to be pipe themed. Pipe mountains and cliffs, huge pipes covered in moss, even trees made out of pipes. As for gameplay applications for pipes, we have the first wonder effect where they come to life, including the ones in the background, with them also spraying water, and these pipe worms you can ride on. There's these other pipes that change places seesaw style when you stand on them. There's also the pipes you can push around and sometimes fit onto other pipes. And then the castle stage where they're affected by gravity and just fall down. Not sure if I can count this one. We have about 5 or so ideas dealing with pipes, out of 12 main stages, which is an okay amount, I guess. World 2 is sky themed, alongside some of the undersides of clouds being covered by frost, so for some levels they do the following with a theme. The first level's pretty cool. There's these guys that kick ice blocks around, the ice block spawners, or the wonder effect with a giant snowball tearing through the environment. We also have snow blocks to break through in one stage, and another stage based around the cloud platforms that shrink. This world also has one of my favorite levels in the game. It has the pretty cool idea of extending the platform you ride on by hitting these blocks. It's also accompanied by Lackey 2s and these shock enemies that try to launch up and hit you. I wanted to point out the clouds or cloud enemies, but they're not exclusive to this world, nor do the levels do anything that's more than just alright with them. It looks so far so good, right? Well, how about World 3? We have the hoppy cat enemies that jump when you're near them, the flying fish guys that try to, well, fly at you, then the hoppy cat launcher in this other stage. And that's about where it ends. They're unique to this world, but I don't feel I can really count these spiky orb enemies. I feel they can be placed in any level anywhere to me. Across 6 levels in this world, we have only 3 ideas that take advantage of the world theme. World 4 is somehow even worse. There's sand that hinders your movement speed and jump height. We also have the Wonder Flower effect that has ruins pop out of the ground, with a single trap in the form of a spike wall we have to worry about. And it could have been a whole level instead, but no, it's done in about 20 seconds. And besides a few enemies like the mummies, rolling guys, and snakes with pots on their heads, we're basically done. I thought this was supposed to be a desert world, you know, full of secrets, treasure, forgotten ruins. Instead they just chose random ideas that would fit in most platformers just fine. Like here, push the blocks in front of you. Isn't this so cool, creative, and unique? Or the farting balloon guys that would fit into practically any stage? What if we used the fire flower, or different types of heat, to turn sand into glass, and then break it with the drill power up in different ways so it could fit into a slot? Or what about using the elephant form's water shooting abilities to wet sand, and then using that wet sand to stop incoming boulders? Where are the scary ghosts? What about giant mummies or hieroglyphs coming to life as they come out of walls to attack you as a wonder effect? Amazingly, in spite being one of the most goddamn boring, uncreative, and even worse designed RPG games ever made, Paper Mario Sticker Star had the foresight to do that as an enemy. Fungi Mines is similar to Worlds 3 and 4 as well. In spite fungi being in the name, they don't do anything interesting with mushrooms. There's no mushroom enemies, or doing something crazy with spawning in a ton of poison or mini mushrooms in different parts of stages. Hell, what if a wonder effect was bringing back the Mega Mushroom? The level aesthetic just ends up shifting to slimy levels later on, with these slime enemies, and this goo you can swim inside of. Half the Wonder Flower effects are also just turning into the slime form, with little to no other additions. Like, I feel if they were gonna bring back the cosmic clones from Galaxy for here and World 4, they could have at least leave behind a trail of goo or sand to make going over the places you've already walked on in a stage have a cool punishment of some sort. It would also make it more thematically tied with their respective world themes as a result. The lava world thankfully gets off of its behind. It does a respectable job like with Worlds 1 and 2. Honestly might be the best one. There's fire blocks, fire bars you spin around, the really cute and amusing popcorn enemies, the rolling rock guys, the falling rock pillars you push, the dragon fossils that come to life, the flame variants of spikes. Buzzy beetles can now swim on top of lava, or the magma lizards that go splat. There's also some different ways the levels ask you to use water to put out fire as well. We have only 6 main levels, so there's at least 2 ideas per main level in World 6 that also tie with the theme. So what happened to like half the worlds in this game? Ultimately, the huge amounts of creativity and wacky or out there concepts isn't something I can say is a great and awesome thing about this game. It's definitely a plus here, a factor to making this a quality title, but I feel it's not far removed from the best of the best that we've seen over 2 decades ago, with examples like Sonic 3, the Galaxy titles, or even a few Mega Man games. I can't confidently call this a game that is bursting or overflowing with creative juices as a result. I'm sorry. Some of this is also stuff we've seen from game series outside of Mario anyways. How about an overview of the final Bowser stages? Given they're not only near the end of the game, but there's only 5 of them to do, so you'd think they'd make all of these really cool and really memorable given there's no side stages in this world as distractions, right? One of the final stages Bowser hypes up as a trial is centered around the missile mags, and they're just a longer than average missile you can stand on. It's not like long, rideable missiles are a one-off idea in games from the 90s like Contra 3 or Metal Slug X anyways. Do they take it anywhere interesting? Not really. The Wonder Flower has them shooting into the sky with different colors to look at, so they have really good spectacle to show off. But if you take away the flashy colors and castle in the background, what do you truly have left? Just floating platforms to ride on top of. There's no enemies combined with them in the Wonder Flower section, nor do they fly in really cool paths. It's the same for the electricity stage. It doesn't have you do jumps over shorter pits to properly adjust the challenge of your now much shorter jump height. They don't have you move electricity around either, and then use that electricity you conduct to interact with enemies in new ways. You shock yourself to attract coins to you, and yeah. You're only going to die if you're possibly distracted by playing with other people. Because this effect doesn't even have a time limit? How not? This is the second to last world of the game. You're gonna have to be going all like, whoa, what's going on? And scrolled off screen by other people. And by the time it starts, it's over. The Seeker bills are also potentially a really cool idea, but it's not like it goes anywhere either. When you activate the Wonder effect, it just has you on a boat that's 90% spectacle, because even when it's Bowser's world, the game is still really holding back and challenging you. You even get a free star delivered here just to be extra safe. Just mash jump on the button without falling backwards and you're done. I feel good because I beat level, and I got Wonder Seed. Next level now. Okay, what else do we have? Homing bullet bills that are just longer than normal? Shame. At least the music part of the stage they're in is pretty cool, I'll admit. Anything besides the music part of this stage, and the very final Bowser level don't do anything for me for these final stages. There's a cool timing challenge with this platform you need to keep jumping on so it moves, but I really struggle to say anything else. I don't want to be unreasonable and expect an absurd amount of amazement from even Nintendo. Having every single stage be like the very first level with the pipes coming to life isn't fair to ask, because that would mean this game would take 20 years to make. But games from the 90s managed to better consistently design their enemies and hazards at least visually to their respective themes, which I feel should have been close to the bare minimum. A big reason I'm being this harsh is with the statement that came out. Apparently the developers had no time limit. Some sources conflict on it if it was only during the prototyping phase, but it seems to indicate that at the very least, they had no demanding deadlines to uphold to, and they attained a golden opportunity of plenty of time to work on this game. Also, many of the worlds set up a premise they simply don't deliver on. You'd think with the mandatory poplin houses in every world, they'd capitalize on what they set up, but it never goes anywhere, ever. World 2 has some poplins that get upset because Bowser Jr. took over the place, and you rescue one, I think. You just talk to them when you come across them. They're upset just like every other overworld place. Moving on. World 3 is waterfall themed with a possible intended supplement of interesting platforming challenges, I think. The poplin here acts like a wise master that's seeing you go through platforming tasks. What if World 3 heavily capitalized on you doing actual trials? You just do regular Mario levels instead. You know, make entire stages based around one of 3 badges you force players to pick from. These are just more Mario levels in not Waterfall World. Ooh, there's golden blocks and it's shiny, so it's different. World 5 has this expedition of poplins that go for a royal seed, and they get lost. But every level besides the ghost level and the second to last one aren't something you can get remotely lost in. This pales in comparison so much to the Lost Woods in Mario World. There they actually do something with the theme. You actually needed to find numerous secret exits to move on to the next world in that game. World 6 is supposed to have this supplemental aspect to the lava theme of some poplins researching different things. I think there's 3 poplin houses, but they only talk about the one. They only mention how the vines were getting scraggly because there's magma rising up. The levels never change or anything, neither does the overworld. No matter how long or how many tries you take to finish stages, oh, the magma's rising, but it never rises. As a somewhat sidetrack to another aspect I see fails to reach its full potential, it's the big, new central gimmick to this game. All that's really missing here is making the Wonder Flowers Wonder Mushrooms instead, as Mario goes bing bing wahoo. These new temporary effects by getting a Wonder Flower change up the level in many different ways. They transform you, change the level gimmick somehow, add new gimmicks altogether, or turn enemies into roided out versions of themselves. In theory, it's increasing the amount of ideas easily twofold, shaking things up greatly in a way no other Mario game has done before. It's hard to say it's not a really good concept on paper. So how'd it turn out? Well, the amount of levels having effects comes with some noticeable caveats. There's about 80 main levels for this game, and with such a big quantity, some measures were going to be absolutely mandatory to take, with some of those being, some effects are plainly copied and pasted from past levels with no changes at all. Some changes aren't remotely interesting. They're basically still just the stage gimmick with a very tiny change added, and would have plainly been normal level mechanics in past Mario titles. And there's also how some effects are way better than others, creating an imbalance in quality. The music levels are absolutely the best ones. 95% of effects just don't compare to an orchestra of singing enemies making you laugh out loud, while having you question your life choices. Some of these we've seen in other games, or they're just really small changes that the Wonder Flowers try to present as more than what they truly are. Like this one here, it's just locking you in a room with a few hoppos, and one is bigger than the rest. You're done in like 10 seconds. The game speed gets changed to be a bit faster than normal. In another stage it's slightly slower than normal. Whoa. This is just basically toggling emulation effects as the radical, cool spin to the level. We extended the poles you normally activate yourself. These easily could have been a different colored block that did the same thing. We redid the cosmic clone idea from Mario Galaxy, but that's all there is to it. It's the same with the balls of water in the air. It's just a regular gimmick from the Mario Bros. Wii title. There's plainly big spike balls you run away from. That's it. Nothing too different from a chase sequence so many other video games have done before. Or the same spike balls from the new titles. Parts of the ground are now covered in slime, alongside some bouncy squares. That's it. You momentarily start skydiving. There's others where it just turns the enemies bigger as they change. I didn't think anything about most of these. The only one I felt was somewhat inspired was the panic-inducing one that's about to crush you. Or take these random airship levels. When you get the flower, Bowser appears personally to harass you. It's neat until you realize it's the exact same uniform effect each time you trigger it for 3 different airship levels. Couldn't they have at least upped the challenge in how fast he fires? Or, change the type of projectile he shoots at you from the background? Or have one of these be Kamek attacking you instead? Wonder Flower powers start out promising with the first 2 stages, but the game quickly loses steam, and it doesn't consistently uphold to the same hook it starts with. It was definitely going to be a challenge for this game to be more unique, because just so many video games exist now compared to back then, and thus it's going to be harder to be consistently unique here. But still, they could have done a better job with making these more interesting. Well, what about the other music stages where the enemies dance around? There's only about 8 of these music stages in the entire game, so it's only about 1 per world. Even all of these aren't noteworthy, just due to the fact that some are really basic and plain. There's the 2 with the disappearing blocks that have no enemies to them. Or the one with the angry spikes and the pumpkin party not being remotely cool, barely being different from the status quo. You dodge the spike balls in place for a bit, water squirts up when you jump on time, and you're done. You go through the pumpkin level with mushrooms moving up and down, and piranha plants dancing in place, but they're not even singing to the music. And that's all you really do for a bit. I think staying at an amount of at least 1 per world, and to the quality of at least the Boo Opera one wouldn't have been too much to ask, but music stages really aren't explored much as a concept. Some Wonder Flowers also transform you into different enemies, but I can't say this is mind-blowing stuff either. This was a plain gimmick in some Yoshi's Island stages, and we already saw plenty of this from Odyssey anyways. Have some more suggestions from me. What about for one of the current Bowser levels, or for one of the special world levels, we have a situation like Animal Antics, where the game asks you to cycle through every single Wonder transformation in order to finish a stage. Animal Antics in DKC2 isn't well designed at all, but the idea is more than good and unique enough to do for this game as well, I'd say. What about a Wonder Flower effect like, oh, coins are bad now, avoid them instead? What if we had different Marios from all the different titles show up as Wonder Flower effects? We could have had deep cuts to like Donkey Kong 94 or Mario Clash in some levels. Aren't these effects supposed to be mind-boggling and crazy? Or what about obstacles or enemies that get changed to take purple coins from you straight up? Or even lives? Like those pesky barrel guys from DKC2. They did this as a throwaway idea in that game. Go ahead and steal these ideas from me. It's not like I'm ever gonna make my own Mario game. It feels like they chose quantity over quality and stretched themselves too thin. I definitely preferred how it was done for Yooka-Laylee in the Impossible Lair. In that game, the entire level gets a change, and visually on top of that, alongside how the count of stages is 20 and then doubled into 40 with an effect for each. The much smaller amount helped them feel a lot more unique there, compared to how many effects in Wonder only last for a short part of the stage. And a good amount in Wonder don't even change the visuals much outside of adding the weird border and music track on top. Pipes coming to life in the background are a rare visual change as a supplement. Yooka-Laylee instead changes the visuals for the entire stage due to the less manpower than needed. And this is besides Yooka-Laylee having a way smaller development team too. And like with Sonic Superstars in that game's Emerald powers, this game also has a supplemental feature of different badges you can unlock for more abilities as you go on. This also feels like something they should have done earlier in the series outside of Paper Mario, but hey, better late than never. The system here is cool, but it lacks much consideration or effort behind the execution, because it lacks variety, alongside not being anything in-depth at all. It's a neat bonus to mess around with, and that's it. It's honestly just as sloppily done as Sonic Superstars Emerald powers. You can equip one, just the one. How many in total? 24. That's it, it's just 24. There's this vestigial feature in-game where it suggests a badge to use, but the only time it ever suggests a specific badge is a single level in Petal Isles, it seems. But feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. In every other level it just picks a random one for you. It's neat a random option is here for it, but I wish they capitalized on suggesting some badges for some stages, like the Palace in World 4. In that one I actually wanted the Dolphin Cake badge, but only after finding out you swim for the boss fight with Bowser Jr. And by the way, guess what? A way better execution of a system like this also exists in a recent platformer. Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair had a near identical system with its equipable tonics, but there's a few aspects to mention. That game lets you equip 3 at once. You can actually unlock a 4th slot permanently once you get every coin on top of it. You know what else? The tonic list for that game is also a pretty beefy 66, compared to the pathetic amount in Wonder. They even do stuff like change the game in silly graphical ways besides just affecting gameplay. We have about a third of the amount in Mario Wonder, and you can't upgrade the badge limit you have at once, not even after 100% in the game. This is such a disappointment. Also, in Yooka-Laylee, the ones that make levels easier also affect the multiplier for currency you get, while ones that make it harder reward you with more money. There's likewise fun, out there ones like the tonic where it swaps your controls around labeled Broken Controller for its own flavor of funny, dumb gimmick abilities to toggle. I haven't even got into the balance of the badges either. Some of these abilities are straight up upgrades to some other ones, but the nail in the coffin is due to the very first one. The Cap Glide one is something I almost never thought to unequip. Why equip the Wall Kick one when the Cap Glide one does the exact same function? Sure, the Cap Glide is kinda slow, but it actually gives you infinite height because you can just glide and jump off of the same wall repeatedly. Why get a charged jump when I can slow down every single jump I make, wall kick infinitely Mega Man X style, and carry items with me while gliding? It's pretty absurd this one is this good, and it's just given to you for free early on. Well, let's say the Cap badge doesn't exist and look over the others. Well, that's still not much better. The spin jump is another one that's just way too good, because you can do it midair and for extra height. It isn't hard to get either, and it's a lot better than the other jump boosting badges. The height it gives you isn't reliant on charging up, and you can do it whenever you want in the air. The wall kick, floaty jump, and crouch charge jump are all universally worse than the air spin in 99% of scenarios. There's these expert badges that are high risk, high reward, and function more as stupid, fun gimmicks to mess around with. And yes, I'll admit, the very last badge you get is pretty good. Balance was hard for me to gauge given I found them too unwieldy, but they're neat additions at least. The cost for badges is also horrible. Some of them are free, some of them are in shops. There's no consistency to where you find them. None of them are really hidden in any cool places either. For example, how much would you charge players for an ability that affects every single level to a very noticeable extent? That gives you a bunch of different blocks that makes so many scenarios safer. Oh, and it occasionally gives you power-ups too. And it makes it easier to reach the top of the flagpole sometimes. How much would you charge as a game developer? Well, the cost of it in Mario Wonder is... This badge has the same worth as a single flower coin. It costs 10. Just 10 coins. It's sitting in this random shop here just waiting for you. Let's have the guessing game again. What do you think is the price for a basic coin magnet? You know, a magnet for the currency the game already showers you with a ton of. Besides the fact that the basic gold coins in this game have the same worth as a used candy wrapper. How much do you think this badge costs? Have a number in your head. Okay, go higher. Go higher again. Do that 2 more times. This badge costs 300 coins? My god. How easy this game is leaves me wanting a lot more out of it in terms of trying to master it. The difficulty was part of the reason I looked forward to the stages with 4 or more stars the most, because they were the few times this game actually challenged me in some way. Outside of the expert badges, I really don't have anything to get good at for most of these stages. There's not any form of hard mode, or even time trials outside of the Wiggler races. So why am I going to play most of these levels again? To make sure I reach the top of every single flagpole? Or just buy a bunch of gotcha cardboard cutouts from the shop so I have all medals on my save file? That's pretty mindless, boring, busy work. Meanwhile in Pizza Tower, in spite the main runtime being about 4 hours, it's a game I keep going back to because of how much I can improve there. Hell, it managed to stretch its playtime for me because of the very high skill ceiling, to the point I've already played it for more than I ever will play Mario Wonder. The game has a rank system, besides 3 achievements, 1 treasure, and 3 secrets every single level has in that game. Mastering the speed demon movement for that game is an absolute joy to me, and it's provided the most fun for a fast-paced 2D platformer I've ever played as a result, even more than the best of the Sonic series. Let me put up an example of me trying to blast through a level in Mario Wonder as fast as I can. Let me show just how many different inputs it takes. I don't have to do more besides jump occasionally and adjust where I'm going to land in a straight line while running right. Compare it to Pizza Tower, where in every single level, mind you, the amount of different actions required from the player to not only time right, but also flow into one another seamlessly is much, much, much higher in what you can potentially do. There's so much room to grow and expand as a player in that game. It's frankly insane, and so highly rewarding seeing the uninterrupted spectacle you create. By contrast, the skill ceiling and skill floor for Mario Wonder are both really low. Let's have a look at the level called Timer Switch Dash. They use the switch blocks for this short challenge here, but in spite the word dash being in the level title, you can do it perfectly fine by walking the entire thing, even with added breathing room on top of that. It's the exact same thing with Timer Switch Climb, because you just go upwards instead, and you don't need to ever hold run to make it. The switches for both of these stages are way too generous, and there's too many of them. The footage you see of me doing one of these stages on screen isn't just me doing it two-handed, or even one-handed. I'm literally playing with my toes. It took me a few tries, but I'm surprised it's possible like this at all. Compare both of these levels to a past example of this same gimmick. Mario Bros. DS has a fairly similar room in one of its castle levels that's the same concept, but there the room for failure is actually present. The game is actually pushing you to climb quickly in order to make it, because even while holding run, you don't have much time to spare. That game funnily enough showers you with more lives than Mario Wonder does, but the moment-to-moment challenge actually exists in that game. Both of the Switch levels in Mario Wonder aren't in World 1, but near the end of World 3, so you're actually close to beating half the game when both of these pathetically easy challenges present themselves. It's having so many easy stages like these that made it so game overs taking 50 purple coins is something I didn't know was a thing until someone else told me about it. Oh, hey Poplin from Fungi Mines, thanks for the free 1-ups. I was worried I was going to run out this far into the game. There's also the extreme overabundance of currency the game just showers you with. They're still doing the purple coins from Odyssey, and in this game it's something you're gonna struggle to run out of. The max flower coin count should have been increased to 9,999, or better yet, give players half the purple coins they get now. Because after testing in a new playthrough, I found out just how generous the game really is. I blasted through the entire game. I did the least amount of stages possible, which is only completing half the stages ever available, just to get to Bowser. I also made sure to never go out of my way for the big 10 purple coins. I only ever got them if they were in the way of my jumps, or they were extremely easy to collect while mindlessly running through a stage, alongside paying for every single blockade in the overworld. My coin counter already reached 900, even though I was 2 worlds away from being done. I skipped World 4, and I needed to finish the Bowser stages. And yet, my pockets were absolutely filled to the brim with these things. There was little reason to buy from the shops as the cap glide is just too good. I wasn't strapped for lives. I didn't care for cosmetics, and on top of that, the seed requirement is really generous for most worlds anyway, so buying seeds from shops wouldn't have affected my route to Bowser, because I can just do a stage on par with the crappy filler from Odyssey in 10 seconds anyway. You could have just switched standees to cost golden coins instead. A very basic change that could make them worth any consideration for me to pick them up. You would give coin reward and rhythm jump an actual purpose by doing this too. As it is now, you can just get a bunch of 1-ups for a few purple coins, so regular golden coins have even less of a purpose than ever before. And again, looking to how Yooka-Laylee did it, the prices there were massively more balanced. I did a playthrough of not bothering to collect a lot of the quills I came across, and given I ignored them so often, I actually couldn't buy all of the tonics I collected. The balance gave way more weight to these colored quills in levels that sport their own types of challenges based on their color. I actively had a reason to be doing them. Hell, I did them in spite the reward being quills, because due to Impossible Lair's really strong level design, they were usually engaging and interesting supplements to the levels. Many wonder effects also just let you become invincible, because, yeah, look at the cool set piece, you'll get through it okay. It's okay, Timmy. Here, have a ton of invincibility stars. It's fine. Or you know, they just make you completely invincible to everything by default. For no reason whatsoever, like when you can swim through lava. It's a cool novelty, but why are there any enemies here? This unironically might be the Mario game with the most stars to collect in levels. Besides the 3D titles where getting stars as the main collectible is the entire point of those games. It's spectacle over substance, because even when it rains stars from the sky, there's no challenge. We don't need a chain star grabs like that cool level from Mario 3, where the game asked you to stay invincible for the whole thing. Else you couldn't walk on the munchers. That was a really cool idea they could have done again. Here we have invincibility status handed out like perfume cards at a mall, even in the later worlds. Or like with the balloon wonder effect that just makes you invincible without the invincibility star. Bumping into the Galoombas doesn't hurt you, and there's not even any spikes to worry about. Besides expert badges, you really can't make this game harder outside of self-imposed challenge either. How much trouble would it have been to add a hard mode? You know, something that's also been done before? Now that I think about it, what's the earliest example of a hard mode in a 2D Mario game? Mario DS? Wait, no, that's not it. Mario 2 on the Game Boy Advance? With the Yoshi eggs instead of... No, wait. No, that's not right either. Oh yeah! Try the very first 2D Mario game! Fucking Mario 1 on the NES had a hard mode. Once you beat Bowser and start a new game, it turns all the Goombas into Buzzy Beetles. It's such a small change, but it does a decent amount to provide added challenge, because now your Fire Flower is useless against way more enemies you come across. Literally just taking away the ability to use power-up balloons and cutting the currency gotten in half would have been not only really goddamn easy to implement, but would have done something to make this game harder. So much for adding hefty replay value, but that was too much to hope for. And moving on to another issue I have with this game, the overworld you go through feels like an obligatory inclusion, as whiny as that might sound. It's definitely an improvement over the one that was way too big for its own good in 3D world, putting its visual flair aside. It's all fairly compact now, and tightly knit together. It's also nice they didn't forget to put in fast travel to anywhere you've been previously, and it doesn't take too long to run somewhere on your own either. The presentation also stands well here, because levels get nicely contextualized like the ones that take place underground in World 1 are appropriately in the underground section of that hub. Same with the ones early on that have the same visuals during the levels, where the hills are covered by the blue flowers. Or this level later on with the Munchers and Bowser floating in the background are just a one-off, but also correlate to where he is in the world map, even though it's just used a single time. Furthermore, the visuals are also pushed by the different camera perspectives we get to see, like with the camera shifts on the faraway palace for World 4, or going up in World 3. stuff like that. This is about where my compliments end, however. You occasionally come across some rocks or broken bridges in your way, and I just have to wonder why they even bothered. You're never gonna be struggling for coins if you're playing alone, and especially if you don't care for the gacha standees. All they do is unlock a pathway for a level or two. That's fucking it. When you come across a rock, do you have to think if you're going to pay for the removal or not? Why would you ever choose no? There's no consideration to these things. It doesn't add anything to the game. In Mario 3, the levels you completed mattered in what route you could take in the overworld. You can beat level 3 or 4 to access the Toad House in World 1, but only one is needed. You don't like auto-scrollers? Well, that's fine, you can skip it. That game somehow has way more thought put into what stage progression you can have. There's also how game overing after beating the mini castle there meant you could go through the route the door was previously placed on, as a form of a checkpoint. Or what about using the few hammers to unlock specific things, like the island of Toad Houses? Or the music boxes you could use to put the Hammer Bros and plants to sleep for a few stages, if you found them annoying to deal with. There's a surprising amount of potential questions to ask yourself in that game's level select. And yet, Mario Wonder also doesn't have any overworld enemies unlike some of the titles before it. How old is Mario 3 again? Oh, Mario 3 is still the king of Mario games with its overworld progression, even though that game, as of 2023, is 35 years old. Wow. Mario Bros. DS likewise had its own neat take on the overworld. It made it so you not only unlocked levels with star coins, but also did the same for different kinds of Toad Houses there. Eventually, once you beat Bowser, you could buy a few different skins for your screen as a neat reward for getting so many of them too. There's no consideration in Wonder if you should or shouldn't unlock a pathway. You just pay a permanent toll. Woo, here's a $5 bill, now go do your job. It's nice you get a good amount of freedom to pick what levels you want to play, because in most worlds you can skip about half or so of the stages outright if you just want to get to the end. But given how easy this game is for the most part, I never had to think of which stages I wanted to play instead of some of the harder ones to progress. I forgot pretty much everything about the overworld in Wonder until I checked for this section of the script, thanks to how little actually happens here. World 1 has you pay 10 coins to remove a rock, and that's it in terms of being remotely notable. It's the same with Petal Isles, there's no rocks to remove there at all. It's practically the same with Worlds 2 and 3. Thankfully World 4 actually bothers to do something with its hub though. You solve a very simple puzzle by standing on all 3 question mark squares in the hub, push away sand piles to access some levels, go behind a sandfall after you get a hint for it, or how other levels aren't ones you can see until you get close to it with the mirages there. Even this world has untapped potential however, because beating Bowser Jr. in World 4 doesn't matter. There's this whole setup of him taking most of the water to himself so that he can have his own pool party amusingly enough. But levels don't get added water, they're all the same. No rejuvenation of the landscape, no different level exits are made available, none of that. World 6 is the only other one that's remotely notable. There you need enough seeds to unlock the handful of badge challenges in that world, where the seed count is asking you to collect nearly every single one to access them. Looking at yet another old game that does more with the overworld, Wario Land 1 had level changes once you beat certain stages. It let you access different levels, and also remixes them so they're unfamiliar to go through. And every world that isn't the SST Cup or the very last one has this as a feature. A game from 1994 that's running on the rough equivalent of a literal calculator had more effort into its map design. I'm not even gonna go in depth onto how they could have done the block palaces from Mario World again. You know, the ones that make harder stages easier. Mario Wonder is already secret exit deficient, so I guess only having a single switch palace might have shined light on how few alternate exits we have here. The game actually ties them to a badge you can get in a random shop for pocket change, so they gave up on having an interesting way of unlocking this feature. Fungi Mines, Bowser's World, and the secret one are all plain as well. Amusingly enough, Lava World is the one you're gonna find yourself getting lost in. even though Fungi Mines is the one we're struggling to find your way is supposedly the theme. Hopefully you never get lost in a map that looks like this. Also, the lava world has this shortcut you can pay for to go back up top. What's even the point of this shortcut back to the top of the hub if you can just fast travel wherever you want anyway? Also, we still can't do basic 4-foot tall falls here. It's something you're still kept on a leash, for whatever reason. I never liked it, I never will, and it's still the same case here after all this time. Let me roam around with the bulrushes gazing, or swim around in the water surrounding petal isles for Pete's sake. Meanwhile, in a better game, Yooka-Laylee in the Impossible Lair has you mostly free to move around in that overworld hub, where you actually have a decent amount of platforming challenges to do in it, and you're not restricted to set paths by the game for any of it. Yooka-Laylee also stomps and pounds the hub world in Mario Wonder, because in that game, the NPCs actually sometimes have funny text to enjoy, instead of the friendly cashiers found with the poplins. You can also pay for these signs so that you get a hint for puzzles you haven't solved for tonics on top of it. Progression of that game's overworld is also tied to puzzles the game asks you to do, sometimes dealing with different kinds of berries to throw in the environment for different effects, or other mildly engaging puzzles needing you to activate specific switches with blocks you move around, or timing challenges, etc. God damn! An indie game from 2019 has a leagues more interesting overworld than the one in Mario Wonder. So much for this new Mario game being the grand return to form that pushes the series forward. A small change they could have stood to add was with the Bowser airships. What if the airships were responsible for dropping enemies into some stages, and that made them a lot harder as a result? Or what if you had to chase them around in the hub like you did in Mario 3? That would have been a cool callback to have. As another staple of the Mario franchise ever since Mario 1, there's a decent amount of secrets to come across for extra levels, or for a few other goodies. This is another place where the game floundered its potential, because it was way better done in a lot of the older titles. There's not too many of them here. Compared to Mario 3, where the game is constantly incentivizing you to fly in levels to see what was up in the sky, power-up usage for coins or extra pathways felt like something they could have done way more with, because I honestly recalled way more secret exits in the DS title than in this one. I like finding Captain Toad in the overworld for 50 coins as a neat bonus, but again, people like me who didn't care to buy more cosmetics just meant I had nothing meaningful to spend these things on. Also, if you're kept out, the coins it gives you are straight up wasted. What an oversight. So much for including any world skips here either. Accessing the secret world doesn't let you warp around sooner. It's pretty negligible as a series staple, I'll admit, but it's yet another cool thing they just didn't do. One of these secrets, and actually isn't meant to be a secret at all, is in World 1. I almost needed a guide for it, because I assumed this was a bottomless pit. It's actually just part of getting the Wonder Flower seed in this level, but there's no hint, given I assume the flowers that occasionally change the levels in small ways aren't always positive. And the flower that's on it was just telling me to jump off the pipe in time, not to actually try and fall deeper into what looks like a bottomless pit. Or like how you access the extra world in World 3. You apparently just go back into the house you got the royal seed from. Okay, what the fuck? I'm glad I pulled up a guide for this, because I never would have found out about this on my own. There's nothing at all that hints towards this being the level to revisit. He says, "Oh, so you came back to me for a harder trial, huh? But it's not like I'd want to talk to any NPCs that aren't the shop owners. All the dialogue that doesn't come from the talking flowers in the levels just plainly sucks." Things like this makes me wish we had it Mario World style of a hint of some sort on the overworld telling you what specific levels have an extra exit with the red dot. I'm not sure how much time I would have wasted for a few of these without a guide and choosing to comb through every single level instead. The overworld doesn't always hint towards an extra exit like here in the lava world, and any landscape hints you might see don't always tell you what levels are actually connected to them anyway. I only see this as a cheap way of them trying to extend gameplay time. What happened to stuff like using the cape to reach this keyhole early in Donut Plains? Or how about thinking to use Yoshi's tongue to eat a key through a wall? Most of the secrets in Wonder aren't anything clever, or ask you to use power-ups for hard-to-reach places. Instead, it's like World 5 of just thinking to revisit the level where you rescue the Poplins for no reason. Again, there's no hint for this one either. You just have to happen to play the stage again randomly. Hell, in Worlds 2 and 4, they straight up just give you the entrance to the special world. You unlock both of these from a path of just doing badge challenges. And it's practically the same case with Petal Isles. In total, we have about 7 secret exits for levels. And I'm being generous with calling these secrets, because I'm counting the 2 stupid ones where you just plainly revisit a level, and the game automatically unlocks the exit for you. By comparison, Mario World had about 20 secret exits, and Mario Bros. DS had about 16. Most of these secrets I didn't think were good or brain scratchers at all, because at the end of the day, the rushed launch title for the Super Nintendo had most of its level exits that lead to Star Road actually be hidden or hard to reach in some way, and not just triggered by going into a boring, time-wasting Poplin house again.
Yep, here we are, special world. Oh, that's cool. I didn't realize that was... I was wondering, because I'm trying to get to the special world in each area, and I didn't know where the special world was here, and apparently it was just right there. Easy as that. That's why I just gotta make sure to beat every level. Because some entrances are, like, really secret, and some are really just, you gotta beat the levels.
As for another thing that's part of tradition, there's the new power-ups. New Soup Wii U, Luigi U, and the one on the 3DS each barely had any new power-ups to speak of, compared to the first 2 new games. Thankfully, they decided to put in some work with the power-up selection this time around, and we have 3 new ones to mess around with. I feel it's a good sign that it took me a while to think of which one I felt was truly the best one of the 3. Levels keep asking you to use different ones for different hazards, and those same levels end up providing the appropriate ones for what they ask you to do. The balance has been done pretty well. We don't have the issue of trying to hoard really strong or really rare power-ups unlike some past titles. Compare this to Mario World with its Cape and Fire Flower, for example. In that game, I almost never want to Fire Flower instead of the Cape, because the flower just gives you a ranged projectile, and that's literally it. Who's taking that over everything the Cape provides 95% of the time? Easily the biggest one, pun not intended, would be the elephant one, the one seen plastered everywhere in marketing. It has plenty of benefits, even if it's not as interesting to me as Ellie from DKC3. Your added heft and girth is used in many different ways. You can destroy way more blocks at once with your size, and run across wider gaps as well. You can defeat bigger enemies with a single stomp. You can push things around faster. You can swing and juggle things in the air for coins. This is all besides the melee trunk swing you have that moves different things around, and also breaks brick blocks. And you even crouch automatically for short passageways. The water shooting capabilities usually don't matter outside of watering a few plants and putting out fire very occasionally, but I really like how many different things this form lets you do. It's easily the power-up in a Mario game with the most unique abilities to its name, by a country mile. The other 2 new power-ups don't have nearly the same amount of depth to them, unfortunately. They're way closer to many power-ups from past games, but at least they're unique enough and don't feel like bland rethreads, I suppose. The drill mushroom can let you move around in the ground and ceilings, while also protecting your head from certain hazards like thwomps and some projectiles, alongside making your ground pound stronger against some enemies immune to being stomped on at all, like the mummy enemies. There's the other features of being able to break crystal blocks easier, and being able to dig out things out of the ground, but it's very, very rarely done. And the bubble flower lets you blow bubbles. That's it, you blow bubbles, you can't change their arc, and you really just trap smaller enemies inside or bounce off of them. I guess they also go through walls. Somehow the ice flower from Mario Wii was more interesting than this one. You could freeze enemies to use as platforms there too, but you could also throw frozen enemies, or ground pound them to break their ice block forms, and even stand on top of frozen bigger enemies momentarily. Hell, it also nullified some fire-based hazard as well. It's got like 5 different uses. Before anyone says, yes, I know of the big chunks of level design speedrunners use the bubble flower to ignore, but outside of being a speedrunning tool, it's pretty lame in terms of what it can do. Maybe make it easier for me to walk through 1 block short gaps, or boost my wall kick by letting me slide up the wall. Do more with the possible idea of being made more slippery like soap. Just something else to make this feel more than standard, you know? It really feels like these 2 other power-ups got shafted in terms of getting the love and time of day to really make them feel special. In terms of presentation and gameplay applications, they pale in comparison to the elephant. Besides the new forms you can pick between now, we also have sprinkled throughout the game these tiny side stages, besides the ones you do for badges. They're thankfully not all formalities, as there's different kinds to see and experience. A few of them have you race Wiggler across different racetracks, and they're probably my favorites. They were some of the few times the platforming in this game was actually pushing me to really try. It's just that they come with a single caveat: there's rubber banding present. Like, if you don't know of the illusion of challenge like I did when I played these, you'll be oblivious to the game adjusting itself to how good you are, with Wiggler not speeding up as much. Look at the difference between these 2 clips. One of them I make it by the skin of my teeth at a little over 60 seconds. And then this other clip is 70 seconds long, where I wasted my time during them, but I still made it just fine. They're a fun diversion nonetheless, even if they lack depth like different time goals, or how they could have maybe had a few more faster routes to take advantage of. Speaking of time goals, the enemy battle arenas I also liked a decent amount. It's a bit of a surprise 2D Mario barely tried these as a concept prior to this game. You get to choose between what power-up suits your preference the most, then take on different rooms of enemies. Like, yeah, these don't have much depth either, though I don't think they needed much depth to them anyway. The biggest gripe is just the room for failure. The time limit as a form of punishment is non-existent. This and the Wiggler races would be good staples for 2D Mario going forward in my book. You also have these other miscellaneous stages where you do something very, very basic for a Wonder Seed. Sometimes it's a platforming challenge. Other times you just collect coins in a single blank music room, or jump to the beat 3 times. They're harmless, I guess. They're exactly like the filler, sleepwalk content you found loads upon loads of in Odyssey, but thankfully there's a few of them here compared to that game. Seems I couldn't even stop myself from dogging on the difficulty of this game, while keeping it close to the designated difficulty section of this video. Who is this game even for? It's one thing to have a low skill floor, a low barrier of entry of required hand and eye coordination to play this, something particularly applicable for the waves of people undoubtedly playing a video game for the very first time now. But the hardest tasks this game provides amounts to a pittance of 5-star levels. Oof. Ringing this up for more playtime doesn't consist of even a decent amount of side achievements or goals to strive for. Labeling levels as completed with one of the expert badges is an idea I've seen tossed around a few times, and it would have been really simple to do, so veteran players have an excuse to keep playing. You can make this game as easy as you'd like, but not as hard as you'd want. A few of these also feel like stage concepts they for some reason didn't take advantage of. One of them has you bounce hoppos with these spring platforms, and it feels like they should have done it outside of this challenge room, but they simply didn't. As for other kinds of diversion stages, we have these search party levels. Most of the search party stages suck. I legitimately hate these things. The premise is this: you have to go around finding 5 flower coins in these small levels by doing a number of things. The main design philosophy is trial and error. Guess and check different places until you finally find what you're looking for. That's the crux of the issue here. It's trial and error for way too much of it. The game explicitly tells you to get your friends if you can't find what you're looking for on your own. Because for whatever godforsaken reason, the invisible blocks they implemented to separate characters are used to solve these puzzles. What if you don't have anyone else to play with? Or if you can't afford Nintendo's online service? Well, have fun possibly trying a bunch of different characters and checking the entire stage for some of these, so that you know what random places you need to jump for invisible blocks. There's no challenge. The level design won't hint to every single one of these collectibles either. Here's an example. Where's the last invisible block in this level here? Up, left, up right. Maybe it's not even on screen. Oh, it's right here, of course. Only took me mindlessly roaming around this stage for over 5 minutes just to know I had to jump specifically here to trigger it. This isn't fulfilling or engaging. This is treating your players like a dog. You don't learn anything meaningful. They don't test your mastery over the game mechanics. They just waste your time. Just plainly make it easier to solve these search party levels when playing with people online, as opposed to making it feel almost required at times just to finish these. The only one I liked to some extent was the one where you have to switch between 3 power-ups so that you can get different coins. Now the game is actually getting you to show off what you've learned by using these power-ups. I wish the coin in the wall was changed so that it was easier to tell that you could go there at all. Because I tried it on the ground earlier, but it just stopped me dead in my tracks, so I assumed I was doing something wrong by going into the wall at all. And I just so happened to be in a place where I didn't consider to drill into the platform I was on. I thought it was too small for that. I should have tried it, but you know. But hey, it's leagues above the one where you need to try a bunch of different golden pipes, one by one by one. I don't know how this got past testing, or who thought people would enjoy this, but the last thing we needed was a callback to one of the most boring, worst levels from Mario 3. It's hard to say if this one or that one is worse, but I'm never gonna replay these kinds of stages willingly. They can piss off. Pushable pipes are established as a gimmick in one of the main levels, and I really wish they had a wavy line, or were cracked on the bottom, or, a visual hint of some sort. And that hint telling you that you can actually push these pipes around, so you'd be able to test people's memory of a level gimmick properly, rather than pushing a bunch of different identical looking pipes. As for something else really heavily falling short of its potential, the boss fights were also a swing and a miss for this game, which is a shame. I never found most of them in most Mario games too interesting, especially the 2D titles, because the developers just somehow never got the memo of giving any of these bosses any invincibility frames, or making their fights feel different game after game after game. Very basic things like changing the room layouts was also somehow a rarity. Contrary to past tradition, they straight up removed mini-bosses from this game. In reality, it's not a big loss if they were all going to be boom boom for the millionth time, but anyone looking for fulfilling boss fights has very little to chew on in this game. There's only 5 of them in total, as Worlds 3 and 5 straight up don't have any. This itself I don't see as a bad change inherently. I don't mind the game shaking things up in regard to the standard same old, as long as it's actually done well. And the few boss fights we do end up getting are cool and unique. Due to the recent law of making it illegal to add new, interesting characters in Mario games anymore, we only have Bowser Jr. and Bowser to face off against. Wario, Waluigi, and Wart all had restraining orders filed against them, and they're still in place since the 90s. They put in a decent amount of work making the fights with Junior feel fresh and all, but there's still not anything I'd ever write home about. They all reach about the same level of just acceptable. I guess I kind of like the one where you change sizes, and he gets trickier to stomp on given he's so much faster, but they're mostly kind of plain. He tends to move around a lot in his shell while spinning, and you find an opening to stomp on him. Long gone are the cool, unique bosses we used to get in Mario Bros. DS, or even Mario 2. Here we always have Bowser Jr. just do a spinny funny, and you wait to hit him. Like this fight here, it's neat he changes the properties of the moving platforms, but there's little of substance. He has the value of a mini-boss, even though he's the big, bad, final problem of an overworld chunk. Not to mention how he's extremely easy to cheese in World 5 if you have a drill mushroom, because he can't do anything about it whatsoever. It's somehow stronger than the invisibility badge, and you just pop out of the ground, rinse, wait, lather, repeat. Bowser is at least a solid fight. The game ending with the jumping in time with the music is a fitting gimmick, even if he fails to get as crazy as he continues to hype himself up as throughout the entire game. Somehow the fight from 3D World has more cool spectacle. Like, come on guys, what happened? And I don't want to hear any stupid comments of, well, 3D World isn't strictly a 2D game like this one, because Pizza Tower's ending is really bloody satisfying. I'm not gonna put it on screen for anyone who somehow hasn't played that game fully, but my point stands. There's the end parts of airships where you come across these enemy generators, but besides being extremely forgettable, I have to wonder if they even classify as bosses. I finished these just as fast as I finished some of the break time stages. They pose very little threat. They could have been full-on enemy gauntlet rooms while the screen gets harder and harder over time, but they're just a formality. Here's something cool you could have done. Have me face some of these bosses with a specific power-up that actually makes them more challenging to fight. And if you succeed with that handicap in place, you could get a reward of some kind, or even unlock more stages outright. Mario Bros. DS had this as the way of unlocking Worlds 4 and 7, where you needed to beat 2 bosses while tiny. You needed to correctly time your ground pounds, and you couldn't get hit once. Doing it felt like a bit of a nail-biter to me, and that never happens with most Mario bosses that aren't the final fights. The difficulty of that challenge was more than made up for by the reward waiting for you by doing it. As for other ways Mario Wonder fails to push and evolve the series, there's a lack of other cool features. Besides the Wiggler races, you don't have anything at all to try and track your time with. I'm more than 100% sure a basic time trial function wouldn't have taken much development resources to add. Sonic Superstars bothered adding one even with how unfinished that game clearly is. You actually do have this feature with the friend races of all things. That's exclusive to online. So hey, if you want such a thing in this game, I hope you're willing to pay for it. There's also no extra game modes like the new series actually had. Coin battle, challenge mode, no multiplayer battle mode like in DS, no minigames. For as lazy as people call that series of games, the new series always had extra modes, and yet Wonder doesn't have any at all. It's like a good cheeseburger without any sides. I only keep wondering, where's the rest? There are the badge challenges and side levels, but they're definitely not the same in terms of feel and gameplay as the other modes I just mentioned. The cute minigames from the Mario DS titles will never be done again at this rate. I also think it would have been cooler if we could go wherever after finishing World 1, and not making Worlds 2 and 3 mandatory. Have a stage you need to beat to enter each world available after beating World 1, and then correspond them to how hard each world is, so you could hypothetically feel really cool when you beat World 6's intro stage, with almost no different badges to help you. What if you added a cutscene with different palace kings for each world, like in Mario 3? I found the end cutscenes for Mario World more charming than the ones in this game by a mile. No, wait, that's right, that would mean including more interesting characters. Never mind, this suggestion's really stupid. I also wish we could play as multiple versions of the same character at once, have a randomizer of some sort, have more actually interesting NPCs to talk to, add infinite lives, maybe have more Easter eggs, among a few other things. Some of these are a bit out there to ask for, like the randomizer, but like come on, there's little in terms of cool fan service besides the few music jingles in the filler stages. I have no idea what else people might find in the game's files in due time, but from what's currently up on the cutting room floor, it seems there might have actually been a timer for stages planned. I then have to ask, what else of substance did they cut from this game, despite the alleged lack of a deadline? Maybe DLC can add some things worth a damn, but who knows if they'll even bother. As a quick side note, I'm gonna take back something I said in the Sonic Superstars video, which is how I don't know anything Superstars does better than Mario Wonder. I really did speak too soon. That game has a decent amount of things better than this one. I unintentionally lied because I guess I had too high hopes that Mario Wonder would be as amazing as everyone is saying. That game has a much higher amount of interesting boss fights. It has extra side modes with time trials and battle mode. The multiplayer camera actually zooms out so it's easier to see up ahead when you're playing with other people. It has a harder version of the main campaign, so experienced players have something to look forward to. Wonder doesn't have any sort of New Game Plus mode. There's also skippable cutscenes. This one's obvious, yet they didn't do it. So many of the cutscenes you just can't skip, you still have to mash for a good amount of them. Superstars did this right too, what the hell? I can't imagine being a speedrunner for this game in this day and age and just sitting through boring, meandering text on screen because they can't be bothered to add a basic skip function. It also has a cute animated title screen compared to the extremely static PNG Mario Wonder has. It also has a good amount of decent looking animated cutscenes alongside it. And, oh yeah, most importantly, it actually has more than a measly single save file. Why should we be forced to make another Switch user for Mario Wonder anyway? It's really annoying. Despite all of my complaining and whining, I only wanted to help grow my YouTube channel, and buckled, so I went with easy clickbait and with an enraging title. And after making the video up to this point, I feel bad for dogging on the game so much in hindsight. I just wanted to get people to actually click on my content, because no one else watches my other videos. Mario Wonder is still one of the very best 2D platformers out there, and stands as a shining example of what developers can really do when given the time and money to do so. I'm so sorry I tricked you guys into clicking on this. Hopefully I didn't upset any of you too much. Nah, I'm fucking with you. I meant everything of what I said in this. This game was like a 7 out of 10 for me. This game proves that Nintendo can still make good, quality, respectable products as they've always been known to do. Their seal of quality is the equivalent of a beaten up car or appliance that just won't quit and almost never acts up. Somewhat rarely does Nintendo result in putting out disappointment compared to most of the competition. Even with this being true, it's got new and better people rising up, heavily challenging the Big N's status as the one and only hailed to deliver consistently good products. Indie games such as Sonic Mania, Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair, Celeste, and now Pizza Tower showing the coming together of passionate people that understand better how to impress, build upon established foundations, and knowing how to give fans much more of what they truly want are only now more common as time goes on. Making games as an individual, or even a few people coming together, is leagues more possible nowadays, and should only get easier with time. And given that, going forward, Nintendo is going to have to keep up to the best of their past examples so they don't get left in the dust. This game really goes to show that having a game design degree doesn't exactly make you good at it. My ramblings aside, I do think Super Mario Wonder is a good product worthy of your time, and perhaps money too. I'm not just saying this so I try to cover my ass and not look like I'm solely shitting on this game for clicks. The most important part of games like these, and the place where you spend 80% of your time in, that being the levels, was generally pretty well done, and managed to be more interesting than usual. But most other factors of this game pale in comparison to indie projects out there. Nintendo's status as this holy grail of good products has started to wane. And when you're beaten in many categories by way less experienced and extremely less well-funded groups of regular people making games, I have to wonder if this game was actually rushed after all, or if the people behind it just don't have what it takes to make amazing experiences. The whole statement of a very lax, if any, time deadline, alongside having plenty of funding, came into question for me the more I sat on my thoughts. They've made way better stuff in the past when they've been under duress. It definitely failed to push 2D Mario as a formula, and especially failed to innovate the 2D platforming genre at all. It doesn't remotely succeed with absolute flying colors at anything, besides the animation flair to me. Not with the music, gameplay, replay value, or length. As a result, they're gonna have to do better next time, because at the moment, I'm just gonna go play Pizza Tower. Now that game is worth its praise twofold. As for where this game stands for me in the 2D Mario lineup, well, Mario 3 is better, Mario World is better, and have me on a cross for saying this, but I found Mario Bros. DS better. Like seriously, so many people are sleeping on it and lumping in with the other new titles, but it's actually pretty cool. I praised it like 3 times in this video. The amount of new ideas, and especially visual flair, are way less than in Wonder, yeah, but I actually felt the level design was immensely more fulfilling, thanks to how much more carefully curated the challenge was. Also, go play Impossible Lair. That game is completely worth the asking price of $30, and that game is also really good. Also, I wanted to say at the start of this video that Mario Wonder isn't better than Mario World, but that's in tandem to me of not thinking that highly of Mario World anyway, contrary to the general consensus of people loving that game to death. It's also really overrated, but I digress. That's its own video. Maybe the next 3D Mario will actually be worth my full interest. And if you want to subscribe in the hopes of more Mario content, don't! I'm not a Mario channel. Well, I half mean it. That'd be way more preferable than being a Sonic channel for sure. But no, I desperately don't want to tie myself to any one series. That'd kill any motivation I have for doing this thing. I'll probably cover more Mario games than Sonic games, but I'm striving to not chain myself to just one specific series, or even just a single game company. Even though Mario is way more consistent, there's only about 10 or so games I'd ever want to talk about. Although this doesn't include any tangentially related series. But unlike my Sonic list, I haven't come up with this one definitively. I suppose I at least have these in mind. I'm absolutely gonna talk about Mario World at one point. Possibly every Mario game on the NES, Mario Land 1 and 2, Wario Land 1, and possibly the whole Wario Land series as well, and Donkey Kong 94. That's about it for this game more or less. Anything after this point is just closing thoughts and me rambling to myself. Click off if you don't care for that. Okay, this next tangent I shoved into the outro because I didn't know where else to place it, and it's more of a personal pet peeve of mine anyway, but I really don't get what people went on about with the reviews. It's not like I can even call people out, because just so many people did it. The whole, oh yeah, this game has like 8 issues I'll talk about for the next 10 minutes, but they're just nitpicks. This game is still amazing. A 9.5 out of 10. It's better than Mario World. Mario has never been better. These things suck, but this game is great. A true masterpiece. That sort of garbage. I'm sure most of these people aren't paid or anything, obviously, but just caught up in bandwagoning because it's Mario. It's great in spite its numerous issues. Or maybe some people want to look for reasons just to like a game. I'm not seeking to detract others' enjoyment in what they like, but I really need to see how alone I am with my thoughts here. To me, this is just Mario Odyssey again, selling like hotcakes and getting universal praise with very little in terms of genuine criticism. It sold over 4 million in the first 2 weeks as it stands, but it was inevitable at the end of the day. It's not like this video is going to hurt this game's reputation and reception by much, if at all. People still like Mario Odyssey to death and buy all the new Pokemon games regardless of bad reviews. Meanwhile, better games like Tropical Freeze and Impossible Lair will be forever shafted because it wasn't Metroid, and the first Yooka-Laylee game ruined any and every hope for any good follow-up of any sort. Yeah, the first game completely sucks, so if they try again, we're never gonna give them a second chance. But whatever. I'm gonna say it again though. Go play Yooka-Laylee and Impossible Lair. Like, come on, it's really good. They're not paying me. They should be though. If you're currently still watching, or still letting it play at this point, maybe you'd care to watch my videos and share them around. I'm getting fuck all in terms of reach. I don't mind if someone lets Sonic Twitter know my almost hour and a half of tearing Sonic Superstars a new asshole. I didn't think I'd be one to ever ask, but my reach is still really small. Any troll and hate comments sent my way will do very little to abate my work on content anyways. They're just words on a screen. No idea what I'm gonna do next, but probably another recent or new game. Probably Penny's Big Breakaway or Metal Slug Tactics. Kind of have to push back my older planned videos because nobody's gonna watch a video on cool, obscure retro game number 15, as opposed to what's now coming out. Maybe once I have a bigger audience, my actual passion content will get more than 100 views, and I'll much better balance what I want to talk about as opposed to what people nowadays will actually watch. Honestly, the only sub goal I have is 1,000, so I can actually get monetized. Anything past that point is meaningless to me. Also, my Ko-Fi is in the description and my channel about page for anyone that cares to support me. Don't feel obligated to, but I'd like to see if I can turn this into a job someday. Making this is exhausting, but I think I have what it takes to be consistent about this. This is me signing off. Sayonara.